My name is Malika, and today we are bringing you a webinar with APR as well as the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. They are going to be discussing all about imposter syndrome, which is quite timely for all of you, hopefully going into exams or just considering a career in maths going forward. Just so you know, this webinar will be recorded and the link will be shared with you after this webinar, as well as posted on our YouTube channel, Success at School. If you've got any questions at all throughout the webinar, please feel free to pop it in the chat. We'll try to answer as we go along, but there will be some time for a Q&A at the end, and no question is a silly question here. So that is enough from me. I'm going to hand this over to James, and they'll be taking you through a quick presentation and a little panel discussion as well. Hope you guys enjoy it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Malika. As mentioned, my name is James. I am joined by my colleagues Amar, Imelda, Joynal, Sami and Assis. We'll do full introductions a little bit later just before we come into the panel discussion itself. But thank you to the IFoA and to Count Me In for inviting us to this session tonight. We're going to be talking to you on imposter syndrome and how to have confidence in a maths-based career. We're all actuaries or actuarial students, so hopefully we know what we're talking about when it comes to that. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of the rough order of play that we're going to be covering this evening over the next sort of 45-50 minutes. So we'll start off with some introductions. So a bit of an intro to the IFoA for those of you who don't know too much about that. We'll then introduce the topic of the evening, imposter syndrome, to you, explain what we're going to be talking about, and then I will get the panelists to quickly introduce themselves as well and give you a little bit of their background. We'll then move on to the main event, which is the panel discussion. That will hopefully form the bulk of what we're talking about today. Once we get to there, you should be hearing less from me, more from the panelists themselves. And we're going to cover three main areas within that. So we're going to start with how to recognize imposter syndrome, both within yourself and also within your peers, colleagues, friends. We're then going to move on to, once you've recognized imposter syndrome, what do you do about it? How do you overcome that? Hopefully give you some tools and strategies that our panelists have found helpful for dealing with that. And then we're just going to spend a few minutes thinking about, careers in maths, how do you take advantage of the opportunities there, and, how do you feel like you belong in such a career? And again, draw on our own experiences within those. And then at the end, we should hopefully have some time for some questions. You should note up at the bar along the top a Q&A function. Please feel free to type your questions into that as we're going through the session. Malika and Tess will be keeping an eye on that throughout the session. So if there's anything they can answer as we go along, they will do that. And then they will save up all the good juicy ones for us at the end and fire them at us, hopefully through the last 5 or 10 minutes. So that's the rough order of what we're going to cover. So intros, as I mentioned, let's first talk a little bit about the IFoA. Hopefully you're on this call this evening because you're thinking, yep, a mathematical career, potentially actuarial is something that can be or would be of interest to you. So about the institute themselves, they're the UK's only chartered professional body for actuaries, and there's about 32,000 members spread across the globe. A big chunk of us here in the UK, but it is a global membership. What do we do as actuaries? Traditionally, there were three main areas. It was pensions, insurance and investment. Those were traditionally where you would have found all the actuaries. These days we are branching out a little bit. Still see a lot of us working in those core areas, but you will also find actuaries working in fields such as data science, AI, climate change, sustainability, and doing things like advising the government, on policy for pensions and social care, and advising other public bodies. So, we've really broadened our footprint on what we get involved in, always coming back to using those core math skills, but with quite a lot layered on top, as we'll hopefully cover later. In terms of the route into the profession, so the majority of actuaries in the UK probably joined as actuarial students from university. There are also direct school leaver routes as well, apprenticeship routes. In an APR, we do offer that alongside our graduate pathway. So those lead you into the actuarial exams. As you go through those, you can qualify as an associate and then move on to qualify as a fellow. And at both those levels of qualification, you do have the right to call yourself a chartered actuary. And on the panel today, we've got a mix of student members and qualified members to talk to you. So hopefully you'll get, a range of experiences and a range of levels of people through their career talking to you this evening. If you want to find out more, best place to visit is the Actuaries website. It's pretty simple, actuaries.org.uk. There's a section there all about, how to get into the profession, what to expect when you join the profession. And there's always emailing direct questions that you can't find there to the careers team at the IFoA, which their website is up, or their email is up there as well. And you can also go onto the Facebook page on that. So 3 good routes to find some info, ask questions if you are interested in finding out more. So that's the intro to the IFoA itself. Now we get on to the main bulk of the talk today. So imposter syndrome. And before we jump into kind of explaining how you recognize it, how you deal with it, and that, we should probably spend a quick minute covering over what is imposter syndrome. And in a nutshell, imposter syndrome is feeling like you don't belong, feeling like you shouldn't be in the position you're in, that you're faking it, or that you're going to be found out, that people are going to realize that you aren't as good as you say you are, or they think you are, despite evidence to the contrary. That's the important thing. It's you deserve to be where you're at, but you don't think you do. That is imposter syndrome in a nutshell. It has found to be particularly prevalent in high-performing individuals, and also, those in more technical, mathematical based courses and careers. And we'll maybe touch a little bit on why that is later as well. But that's what we're talking about this evening. As I mentioned, we'll do some introductions before I just jump in and start grilling the team. So we'll go through it. So I've got Amar, Imelda, Joynal, Sami and Assis joining us this evening. So we'll just go through them in order. Amar, do you want to spend a quick minute talking about yourself?
Thanks, James. So yeah, my name's Amar and I'm a senior actuarial associate here at APR. To give you some background about myself, so I'm originally from Leicester. I'll start by talking about my journey after my GCSEs. So I always loved maths. For A levels, I did maths, further maths, physics, and economics. Loved them all. Loved maths so much that I did a maths degree at Warwick, and after that, I became a teacher. So I trained to be a teacher and did a PGCE course, and then was a maths teacher in Leicester. And that's really the first time as a teacher I discovered what actuarial science is. I thought it was really cool. So I did a master's in actuarial science with data analytics at Uni of Leicester. And then I joined APR as a grad about 5 years ago. I have since qualified, so I'm a fellow qualified actuary, which means no more exams. Probably not what all of you want to hear as you're gearing up for your exams in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, internally at APR, so I look after our work experience and internships function. So amongst other things, that includes programs aimed at 16 or 17-year-olds, and then others aimed at 17 to 20-year-olds. And then finally, I'm also a lecturer part-time at the University of Leicester.
Thank you very much, Amar. We look forward to hearing from you later in the evening. Imelda, would you like to quickly introduce yourselves to the team?
Yeah, thanks, James. So my name's Imelda. I grew up in Wrexham, and I did maths, further maths, French and chemistry for my A-levels, and then maths was my favourite, so I did a maths degree. And then I found out about actuarial science through that. So one of the sort of probability and statistic courses, which was my sort of favourite thing, they put an announcement out saying this is you can get exemptions from some of the IFoA exams if you've done this course, and that's where I first heard of the IFoA basically. And so I was applying for graduate jobs in my final year of uni, and then I came to work at APR, and that was nearly 7 years ago, and I've qualified as an actuary a couple of years ago, and I really like it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Imelda. Joynal, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yep. Hi everyone. I'm Joynal. I've been working at APR for just under 3 years. I'm originally from a small town in the northwest, where for my A-levels I studied maths, further maths, and economics. I guess sort of unusually realised that wanted to be an actuary from quite an early age, so I ended up studying actuarial science at university, moving down to London, where I subsequently stayed to start working. Couple of interesting things I've worked on to date is mainly in my role as a pricing analyst, where I've worked on looking at risks for some of the largest companies like a Boeing versus looking at some more niche examples like a local chicken farmer and their risks. So I've worked on a lot of interesting and a good variety of projects so far.
Thank you very much, Joynal. Sammy, you're up next. Do you want to say hello and a quick word about yourself?
Thanks, James. Hi, everyone. I'm Sammy. You might be able to tell in a really well-lit cafe. Unfortunately, my way out this evening, so apologies for any background noise. I grew up in Somerset, did my A-levels quite a long time ago now in maths and sciences. I went on to do a maths degree like some of the other panelists here, and that led me into an actuarial career, and I joined APR as a graduate about 10 years ago. These days I'm a qualified actuary and an associate partner like James at APR, and I split my time between doing actuarial work about half the time for our clients and insurance companies, and the other half the time I spend running the business internally. I'm on our management group, I run our risk management function, a few other bits and pieces as well. So I've got a good split there.
Thank you, Sammy. And then finally, Assis, would you please introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, I'm Assis. I've been with APR for just over 2 years now. I joined straight out of university, and in that time I've mainly worked on data migration and model development projects. Honestly, I didn't really have a fixed plan early on, like Joynal, but like the rest of the group, I always enjoyed maths, so I decided to take a chance and pursue a degree in it. I only realized actuarial science is the right path for me when I had the chance to try out an insurance-related role through an internship. So I definitely recommend applying to every opportunity that you can, even if you're not 100% sure yet that would suit you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. So as Sammy mentioned, I'm one of the associate partners as well. My name is James, but my role this evening is to facilitate, so I'm not going to give you too much more about myself. Instead, we're going to focus on the team who, as you've heard, quite diverse backgrounds, but a very strong theme of strong mathematical ability, maths, GCSEs, A-levels, mathematically based degrees, and that's going to play into a little bit about what we talk later today as well. So let's jump into things. Let's look at imposter syndrome and how to recognize it, both in yourself and in others. So we're going to start this section with asking some of the team, when did they first experience imposter syndrome and what did it feel like for them? So Joynal, we're going to start with you for this one.
Yeah, so I think I actually experienced imposter syndrome for the first time pretty early on in terms of my educational career, and it might be something that someone attending this call could relate to, but that was when I transitioned from my GCSEs going into A-levels. So I went to a separate sixth form college, and it was in my first week of taking further maths classes. And what I realized was, during my GCSEs, I was pretty comfortable just coasting on natural ability. So I hadn't really gotten used to that type of thinking, or the sort of maths that was a step up further maths A levels. And what I sort of saw around me was that, you know, a lot of other students who came from other and they seem to be a bit more prepared on taking. It felt like a lot of the students were, you know, putting their hands up faster than me, or nodding and saying they agree and understood all the subjects, all the topics that we were being taught. And so I think I've recognized now that the feeling I had at that stage, you know, that feeling of, am I actually not good at maths? Why is everyone better than me? You know, was it all a lie up to date? I recognize now that that was my first sort of introduction to getting feelings of imposter syndrome.
Thank you, Joanel. Thank you for sharing that. We'll just go around some of the rest of the group as well and get a few more fields. So Imelda, when did you first encounter imposter syndrome in yourself?
Yeah, I think this was when I started at uni. That's probably when I first felt like I was an imposter. So obviously, like, I'd got in and everything, but then once I got there, there were so many people who were just so clever and so confident and spoke so eloquently and just knew a lot about, like, literature and history and, like, all this stuff that I hadn't really ever touched on at school. And in math specifically, yeah, just working with other people who are just so confident at what they're saying. And I felt like it led to a lot of anxiety, where I felt like I had to look confident in tutorials and not question things that I didn't understand. So I was like, okay, I'll just file that away and work on it on my own later, because the important thing was, like, looking like you knew what you were talking about.
Yeah, that point we raised at the beginning of, you know, feeling like you're faking it and feeling like you have to fake it. So thank you for that, Imelda. And then Sammy, just to finish us off on this one, when did you first encounter imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I can really relate to what Imelda was saying there. I had a similar experience at university. I had come to university, I'd gone to a comprehensive school, I was the first in my family to go to university, and I went to a university where I was very much in the minority in that. And the maths I was doing was hard, and that was really tough. But I'd sort of expected that. But what I hadn't really expected was everything else that went around it, the dinner table conversations, we had a quiz machine in the bar and people were answering questions on politics and history and classical music and art and literature and all these things that I had no idea about. You know, I remember there being a kind of US election in my first term at uni, and people were debating the merits of the various candidates, and I had no idea who any of them were. And I really struggled with that. And I think part of being at university, the environment is very intense. You're living and working and eating and drinking and socializing and everything with the same group of people. So you haven't got that kind of wider network and wider context to perhaps compare yourself against. And so it really dented my confidence. And I think it took me a good couple of years after leaving that environment and get the kind of most supportive line manager and all those other things once I got into work to help me rebuild that.
And just on that point, you talk about, yeah, you've rebuilt your confidence now, but do you ever find the feelings resurfacing again? Ever find yourself thinking even now that you don't quite deserve to be where you are?
Oh no, I'm perfect now. No, no, I definitely do. Quite often, the type of work we do in a consultancy, we move around different clients, different projects on quite a regular basis. And every time I start a new project, really, I find myself chucked in at the deep end and feeling like I'm not sure they've hired the right person here. Maybe they should have gone for someone else. I mean, currently started a new project last week, and I'm up to my neck in 17 different 100-page documents that I feel I need to digest and understand every word of. But I think the difference now is I'm much more conscious of it. I can kind of feel it, but also I can objectively see that's probably not really what's going on. I give myself a bit of grace. I have a sort of 3 months timeline in my mind, which is, you know, I can ask silly questions and feel like I don't know all the answers for the first few months and tell myself that that's just a normal part of getting up to speed and it's totally expected. And that's the experience I've had talking to colleagues as well over time, that you know, the feedback has always been, oh, you got up to speed really quickly and you know, you were doing a really good job from early on. Whereas at the time I'd felt like I I was really out of my depth and absolutely useless and wasting everyone else's time by asking lots of questions. So I think the being aware of it, being able to be a bit more objective and know that sort of rationally that it's probably not the case, even if emotionally I feel a bit like I'm out of my depth.
Yeah, thank you. And definitely being aware that your own perception doesn't always match up with other people's perception, and usually you're your own worst critic. But I think interesting there from Joynal, Imelda and Sammy, there's a bit of a common theme of changing environment where you're getting into something new, and it's that phase of getting up to speed, in particular where imposter syndrome can really crop up for people. And university was mentioned by both Imelda and Sammy. So Assis, do you think schools and university environments in particular contribute to that?
I think in school, there's a lot of emphasis and pressure to achieve certain grades. I think people tend to value themselves and others based on that. Some of that pressure is self-inflicted, but some of it is also external. I think sometimes it can make it feel like the main goal is just to hit a certain mark rather than to actually enjoy and engage with the learning process. I think that can lead to avoidant behaviors and a fear of failure. I think it's important to see mistakes as a normal part of learning rather than letting it discourage you. It's easy to fall into a trap of feeling behind or less than, but it's important to remember that everyone learns at your own pace, and those early grades don't define your future potential. It's your continuous effort that does.
Yeah, I think that is very true, Assis. It's the work you put in that's important. And we do have an ex-teacher on the panel. So Amar, particularly thinking in relation to your previous students, have you ever noticed in students that they're experiencing imposter syndrome, and what did you do to help them in that case?
Yeah, good question, James. So quite regularly you see this as a teacher, as I would myself, and it helped that I could understand and relate with the students better, having experienced imposter syndrome myself. So I could really empathize with them because I really share what everyone else on the panel has said in terms of how they've initially experienced it. What I saw that generally it was more common in females who sort of self-doubt when responding to questions or discussions in class where they may not be as willing to contribute to discussion. But actually it happens to everyone. And then to answer your second part of the question, so how did it help them through it? So from my perspective, it was important to build self-confidence and to make students feel empowered when contributing to conversation. So I'd adapt how I'd ask questions, slowly build that self-confidence. So maybe some of the things that you're used to as students, things like using mini whiteboards, praise, and slowly engaging students in conversation, making them see that they are better than they think they are. And most importantly, it's okay to be wrong. No one is right all of the time. So it's important to show that. And I thought it was important to show that myself. So as a teacher, I wanted to make sure students saw that I wasn't always getting it right all of the time either.
Thank you, Amar. Very helpful. And I think leads us nicely onto our next section because we have Amar there talking a little bit about how he helped some of his students, how you could help someone else through imposter syndrome. But obviously, before you get to that stage, you've got to be able to help yourself whenever you're dealing with doubts. So in this section, we're now going to move on to talking with the panelists about what tools and strategies do they employ now when they notice they're feeling imposter syndrome, and what do they do to overcome that? So we're going to start, just jump straight into have you developed any strategies that help you deal with imposter feelings or moments of self-doubt? And we're going to start with Imelda on this one.
Yeah, so my main strategy is now to always ask. I think a lot of the time I shied away from asking questions if I thought they would make me look stupid, but it's so much better to look stupid for 20 seconds and then the person you're asking forgets about it the next day than you spend weeks and weeks worrying about it and it gets worse, it doesn't get better. So that would be my main strategy is be scared and do it anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And I would invite all of you who are listening this evening, think back. Has there ever been a point where you've been sitting in class and you've been wondering, I wonder exactly what's going on there, but you don't want to ask the question in case you ask silly, and then somebody else asks exactly the question you were thinking about, and that feeling of relief when you realize, hey, it's not just me who doesn't get this. I'm sure we've all been there. And now imagine, you're the person who's asking that question, knowing you're going to be helping out those around you. It's not about you looking silly. It's about you helping your friends. It's a very different way to look at it. Now, moving on, thinking about, was there a particular turning point? Was there one piece of advice? Was there one mentor, one situation, Assis, that helped you rethink your confidence and your own abilities?
Yeah, James, I did receive some really good advice from my line manager whilst at APR. She mentioned that you're the only person that's going to judge you in your process of trying to get better. Everyone around you just wants to see you succeed. And I feel like that advice has really helped me to see challenging situations not as something to avoid, but as an opportunity for growth. And like Imelda said, don't be afraid to ask, because when you ask, you're going to get the help that you need. If there's something you don't know now and you don't ask and you still don't know it during your exams, you're the only person that's going to suffer from it. So even though it's daunting to put yourself out there, remember that everybody is on your side and you're your own worst critic.
Thank you, Assis. And now, looking at the other end of the experience scale, Sammy, was there a particular turning point for you?
Yeah, the example that comes to mind for me is I became a mentor myself a couple of years ago on an IFoA kind of cross-company mentoring scheme, which I probably felt a bit of imposter syndrome in signing up for that, and was I experienced enough to be a mentor to someone else. But I overcame that and signed up, and when I met my mentee and we got chatting, and some of the challenges and the questions that they were bringing to me, and I was finding that they were quite familiar, and they were challenges that I'd had a few years ago that I'd almost forgotten about, because it'd been a while ago and I'd worked through them, and I'd had strategies for kind of managing them now. And so not only did I have some advice to give her, but I also had this sort of reflection that, I used to have these challenges, and now some of them, lots of them I had gone away and I was managing much better. So that kind of period of reflection, or that opportunity to reflect and look back at how much I'd developed and skills I'd learned over the years was really, really useful. And I think you don't always get the chance to do that when you're in work. You're constantly sort of pushing yourself and stretching yourself and looking to the next thing. And I'm always doing something new and trying to manage a new bit of the business or taking on a new project, whatever it might be. So you're always a little bit out of your comfort zone, a little bit out of your depth, and actually taking the opportunity to sort of stop and look back and look at how much you have grown was for me a really useful way of building my confidence and showing that I've learned a lot and I'm going to carry on learning a lot and continuing to grow. And I think it's worth saying as well, as a sort of addendum to that, is you don't need to be 10 years into your career being a mentor to get some of that. I think it can come as a, when you've been in a team for a few weeks and a new person joins and they want to know who's the right person to talk to or where to get certain information, or if you're working with colleagues or your peers at school, and different people will be better and worse at different things, and helping each other out is a good way of kind of building your own confidence as well as helping other people.
Yeah, thank you, Sammy. Yeah. Nobody knows everything. Everybody's going to need help at some point. Everybody's going to be able to give help at some point. It's very worth keeping that at the front of your minds at all times. And we did mention at the start, we've came back to it a few points, this feeling of, you're faking it. So Joynal, what advice would you give to anyone on the call who feels like at certain times they're faking it in their maths class or a more technical environment, even if their results are looking good on paper?
Yeah, so well, my Wi-Fi cut out a bit slightly, but I think I just picked up what you've asked me. What I want to push, I guess, is from the start, is to emphasize that to a certain degree, everyone will at some stage have faked it. It's very unlikely and very rare that an individual throughout their academic and employment career will have encountered every single situation and would have known with absolute confidence the right answer to everything. So I'd emphasize that you look around you and you see that everyone seems to be doing well, and that might not be the case. Some people are just better at faking it until they make it better than others. What I will then say is the important point to consider here is that you are doing well on paper, so you should always carry that with you and use that to back yourself. And also I'd emphasize when it's the most important to then be vocal about when you are struggling. You're essentially breaking that sort of stigma that you've placed around yourself to be perfect, or the expectation that you've placed to always know and always have to fake it. And it allows your classmates and your colleagues to connect with you and support you better when you're honest and open about when you're struggling with certain things. So in a way, it humanizes everyone. But that's sort of my advice I'd give to people who feel like they are faking it to some extent.
Thank you, Joel. Yeah, I think unfortunately your Wi-Fi cut out a little bit on us, but I think we got most of what you were saying there. And yeah, just on Joel's first point, I'm a consultant, and I can confirm that we're faking it all the time. It's perfectly natural. So don't worry if sometimes you do feel like perhaps you're projecting a little bit more confidence than you might have. That is perfectly normal. And then I think final part in this section before we moved on, we've touched a couple of times, around seeking support from others, and supporting others yourselves. So Amar, I just want to come back to you and on the topic of how important is community, peer support, mentorship in building confidence, and have you benefited from that community yourself? Was there a turning point for you, a piece of advice or a particular mentor that helped you rethink your own confidence?
Yeah, no, good question, James. So yeah, I think support is massively important, and having the right group of friends or colleagues made a huge difference for me. What I found that it's rare that people actively put you down, but it's more common for some people to be passive, whereas the right people will always be there for you, motivate you, inspire you, celebrate your successes. And it's easier, I would say, to have that with family and friends, but sometimes you need that at work and you enjoy your job more when you're better at it. And when you have colleagues who believe in you and want you to do and be great, it definitely helps. So it's important to surround yourself with the right people. Essentially, you are a product of your environment. And I think I'm lucky to have that right now. And it's one of the main reasons that I enjoy the job that I have. But going a bit further than that, I think it's important to know that you can be that person as well. You can be that inspiration for your friends in school right now and in future, for your colleagues when you're in work. It's important to remember that life's too short to be getting jealous about other people succeeding. So supporting and inspiring those around you is gold dust for me, basically.
Thank you, Amar. And I think, just to bring together a bit on strategies and things like that, I think the most important thing for you all to take away from this is to be aware that nobody expects you to know everything. The only person who will lay that expectation on you is yourself. So if there are things you don't know or you find maybe I'm not as up to speed as I should be here, ask questions, show that you can get yourself up to speed. And that's all people will be looking for unless they are horrifically unreasonable, and you don't come across people like that very often. So I think that's one of the most important things. So we're just going to move on again. And now we're going to think about, belonging and opportunities in a maths career. So how do going into these really technical careers that are full of really smart people, how do you feel like you belong? How do you take advantage of the opportunities and not get overawed by it? So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking along these themes. So I'm going to circle back around to Assis. And Assis, what would you say to someone who enjoys maths, but wouldn't describe themselves as a maths person?
I think it's important to not accept your feelings as facts, but to question why you feel that way. If it's because you feel you need to be the fastest at problems and never make mistakes, I think it's important to recognize that you're setting yourself unrealistic standards. If you enjoy maths and it's something you want to do more of, and you're willing to put in the effort to learn and grow, then you are a maths person. And if it's because you feel you don't fit a certain demographic or stereotype, it's important to remember there is no single picture of what a maths person looks like. And the more you show up as yourself in these spaces, the more you'll expand what being a maths person can look like for the next person.
Yeah, I think that's very true, Assis. And Amar, would you have anything to add on that point?
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, firstly, agree with everything Assis has said there. For me, the best piece of advice I've ever had was just always say yes and be willing to jump into opportunities that come your way. And in doing that, you'll surprise yourself with where you end up, and more often than not, you'll enjoy the journey too. So do what you enjoy, and then be active and proactive in having ambitions and making them become reality. For the majority of you on the call, your entire life has been fairly predetermined up until this stage. So, in school, you've got a timetable and you follow that. Then as you move on to GCSEs, you've got some options, but it's still fairly structured. Similarly, so for college, you get a bit more flex, but even if you choose to go to university, you still got a timetable, even though you choose the course that you have. And so you've had all this structure, but that all changes when you become a grown-up. And it's really your chance to do what you want. So do something you enjoy. Luckily, if that's maths, then not only will you enjoy what you're doing, but you'll most likely get paid fairly well for doing it as well.
Indeed, one of the nice benefits of being an actuary, for sure. And I think just to add my quick 2 thoughts on the maths person point in particular. For me, a maths person isn't someone who knows all the answers. A maths person is someone who's willing to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I can find it out for you. That's much more helpful and much more important, and speaks to a much more confident and impressive individual, in my mind. So, having just talked a little bit about a maths person, and probably got you in the mind of stereotypes and things like that, let's move on to busting a few myths. So, Sammy, is there any particular myth or misconception about technical careers that you'd like to bust and blow out of the water today?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is that the kind of quite often you find yourself in a room with a really technical sounding person who knows all the right words to use, the right lingo, and can rattle off great long reams of information. And I guess the myth is that they're the best person for the job, or they're the most knowledgeable person, or the best person for the task at hand. I think the first thing to say is that quite often that person is not the most knowledgeable person, and it's a bit of a bluff, a bit of bluster. Perhaps they're not feeling very confident themselves, and using lots of long words can sort of help them fake it till they make it. But even for the ones who are really, really knowledgeable, and there are some of them out there, actually in a maths career in particular, and in a kind of business environment, it's really important not just to be technically brilliant. That's important. You need to know your stuff, but also to be able to kind of communicate that. You're bound to be working with people who don't have the same training as you, don't have the same kind of technical ability as you. They're good at something different, and particularly in a business environment, sooner or later you will find yourself needing to explain what you're doing to one of those people, and probably get their approval or their budget or something to do what you want to do. So the best person for the job in a technical career is very often the person who can marry a good level of technical knowledge with a really good level of kind of communication, and being able to explain what they're doing from a technical perspective to somebody who doesn't have that. And so the person who can talk in the most detail is very often not the person who can put all of that package of skills together.
Thank you, Sammy. And I think, Joynal, you have a nice complementary viewpoint to go with this one as well.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, as you said, it complements what Sammy said pretty well. I think, yeah, my related myth would be that, almost all technical careers involve just being confined to your desk, cracking out calculations, which I want to stress is a big myth. There will always be some human element to a technical career. And as Sammy said, sometimes being the sharpest, brightest, most intelligent mathematician might not necessarily be the key to succeeding in that career. What's more important, in my opinion, is, how are you able to influence your stakeholders, the other people in that business who, they might not know a single sort of lick of mathematics, but still they hold influence within the company. And if you want your ideas to be heard, you have to figure out how to get them to buy into those ideas. And as Sammy said, the most successful person is the one who can sort of bring those mathematical ideas together with a way of explaining that and getting people to digest that easily. But yeah, definitely stress that whichever technical career you hope to go into, you definitely do need to know how to interact with everyone in a company, and you most certainly won't be stuck to your desk writing out calculations on a pen and paper for 8 hours a day.
No, I think those days are long gone, Joynal. And yeah, I think just to reiterate, what Joynal said, it's not necessarily about being the best at the maths and only that. And as Sammy said, it's not about being the best sounding mathematician and only that. You have to add a bit wider to your skill set. You can't just be good at maths to be successful in a mathematical career. And Imelda, just to finish us off in this section, any myths you want to bust today?
Yeah, I'd like to bust the myth that our job is boring. So I know, like, if you ask a person on the street, most people don't know what an actuary is, but where they are in films and TV, they're sort of portrayed as being like very boring, and they've like just behind the desk with their calculators, and I found it to be not that at all. So obviously all the people I work with are very nice, fun people, and the work is actually really interesting and fun as well. So I was talking to my brother the other day, and I was telling him something I was doing at work, which is like like modeling satellite insurance or something. He was like, Mel, I can't believe you didn't tell me that this is what you did at work. I thought you were just on spreadsheets all day looking at numbers. This is actually really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Some of what we do is interesting. I'm glad you brought that one up, Imelda, because yeah, you can look at it. You probably, those of you who are still studying in school, you probably get it from your friends. Oh, it's boring, liking maths. It's not the case. Once you start putting it into practice in the real world, you can see some really interesting stuff. And especially once you bring in what Joynal and Sammy were saying, it's not just about the core maths itself. You've also then got to be able to explain what that means. So then, just to close, we're just going to take a few moments to reflect back over some of the things we've covered in this before we open it up to questions and that. So, if you've been so enthralled by what we've been saying, you haven't got your questions out, do start furiously typing them into the Q&A section. But to give you a few minutes grace on that before we get into it, we're going to cover our last couple of questions for the panel. So, Joynal, last one for you. If you could go back and you could give your younger self a single piece of advice about confidence or career direction, what would you say? Oh dear, I think we may have lost Joynal. I suspect, given what he was saying earlier on about faking it, his piece of advice to his younger self is probably going to be that most people are faking it, and it's okay to be the first person in the room to put your hand up and break that veneer and show that, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Please explain this. So I think it's very important to be aware of the fact that what you see from other individuals isn't the full reality of what's going on. It's just what they're presenting out. Okay, let's move on to the second one. So, Imelda, what's something you're proud of now that your younger self never would have imagined you'd be able to do?
Yeah, I think that the corporate world in general always felt very out of reach for me. I was worried, I don't have the right look, or I can't talk the talk, or I wouldn't be sort of like polished enough. So I think just being a qualified actuary is something that my younger self would be very surprised and proud to learn.
I am sure she would not, Imelda. I'm sure she would not. But yeah, I think it's true. I think all our younger selves would be surprised at where we've ended up and some of the things we've done. So yeah, and then Amar, what about you? Something you're proud of now that you never would have envisaged yourself being able to do?
Yeah, good question, James. So being able to speak in front of people. As a child, I was absolutely terrified of speaking in front of anyone. I couldn't do interviews. Even in class, I wouldn't be willing to, talk at the front or even answer any questions. Whereas now, I didn't realize how fun it was. So I put my hand up whenever the opportunity arises. So yeah, it's great.
Excellent. And yeah, definitely would not have guessed from your delivery of your answers earlier, Amar, that you don't like speaking in front of people. And also, I'm sure you're not the only one in the panel who either didn't used to or still doesn't like presenting to people. But hopefully by how slick this has been, you wouldn't guess it. And then final thoughts before we open up the Q&A, spend a few minutes answering some questions to all of you who've been so kind to join us this evening. I'm going to go back to you, Cease, for the final one. So what would you say to anyone listening today who's unsure whether they belong in a maths-based career?
I'd say at this point in your life as a teenager, there's really no job or career that you can't do in the future if you're willing to put the time and effort in now. So if you recognize you enjoy problem solving or find yourself drawn to technical ideas, that's already a great starting point. I think it's important to push forward with this and take advantage of that curiosity and explore your options. Work hard and look into every single career that's ever sparked your interest, even slightly. And once you figure out what you want to do, and if it is actuarial science, then like Amar mentioned, you can go for insight days or trading weeks or summer programs and just go all in because you absolutely can succeed in this space and the field would be lucky to have you.
Definitely agree, Assis. So thank you, Assis. Thank you to all the panelists. And just actually before we open up to the Q&A, I'm just going to bring us back around to imposter syndrome and a quick anecdote from my own career. So last week, actually, Sammy and I both went to meet up with a very prominent chief actuary within the industry because she'd reached out to us about a technical topic that she wanted to know a little bit more about, and she knew that as a company we had a little bit of expertise in that area. So Sammy and I volunteered to go along. The team did a load of really good work, pulled together lots of really good analysis and research. We produced a very solid presentation deck to take with us. Sammy and I went over on the material. We knew it backwards and forwards. Add on top of that, we're both associate partners at APR. We report directly into the partners. We have probably about 25 years worth of actuarial experience between us. And yet still, on the tube, on the way to that meeting, we basically came to the conclusion that we shouldn't be going because there was nothing we could tell this woman that she didn't already know, because she was a chief actuary and therefore she must know this topic better than us, and there would be nothing in there that would be of use to her, and it would just be a waste of her time, and she would laugh us out of the building. Thankfully, we were on the tube directly there when we came to this conclusion, and we didn't have time to pull out, so we just had to suck it up and push through the meeting. And as it turned out, that proved to be completely false. They were just intrusive thoughts. They were just imposter syndrome rearing its head. We actually got some really good feedback on some really helpful, useful points we had raised for this chief actuary, which we should have known that was the case given the amount of expertise and research that had gone in behind there. We had the evidence to show we should have been in that room, but we had basically talked ourselves out of it before we got there, purely because of imposter syndrome. So it can happen to us all. It's normal. Hopefully, some of what the panelists have said this evening will be helpful to you. Whenever it rears its head for you in the future, you can be able to deal with it and go on to, very successful careers in whatever fields you choose, whether that be math-based fields or whether that be something completely different. So I'm now going to stop sharing the slides, and I think Malika and Tess are going to start bombarding us with any of the questions they haven't been able to answer as we've gone along. Thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Thank you so much, James and the panelists. That was really, really, really insightful. Hoping that everyone's going to take a moment to self-reflect this Tuesday evening. We've had a couple of questions come in. Some of them have come via my email, so I just want to reiterate a couple of things that have been said today before I ask them, and that's being comfortable, being uncomfortable. No question is a silly question. It's how you grow. So please take the steps, as small as they are. Post those questions in the chat. We're all here to support you. But the first question, we'll go with one that is actually in the chat, is about being an actuary. And that is, in order to be an actuary, would you suggest the maths degree route or the actuarial sciences degree route?
Shall I start on that one?
Yeah.
And then guys jump in if you've anything to add for me. So as an employer, whenever we're recruiting, we look at both. I think there are advantages and disadvantages to both routes. The actuarial science degree route gives you lots of exemptions, gets you up through the exams within the profession quicker. It means you're coming in already knowing a lot of the technical background. And that is a big advantage. But I think equally a maths-based career, you show you have the core skills to be able to pick up the exams. You maybe come in with some slightly wider, mathematical abilities and viewpoints. So you maybe approach problems in a different way, which is also helpful to the profession. So I think rather unhelpfully, I'm going to sit in the fence and say either is useful. Neither one of them is going to close down the option of being an actuary to you. And so if you prefer one or the other, pick the one you like the look of. Would any of the team have anything to add on that? Joyno, I think you're ready to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'd jump in. So I obviously studied actuarial science at university. But what I will say, having obviously started my career now, I might have actually made the controversial decision of actually choosing to study maths if I'd have gone back. The reason for that is, as James said, I quickly realized once I started that most employers don't discriminate between actuarial science versus maths. So I think the question is what would be your objective? Are you asking this question because you're saying, what's the best degree to guarantee me a job? In that case, I'll sort of honestly say your odds of getting any sort of career or a job that you apply to as a graduate is the same between maths and actuarial science. Are you thinking a bit more into the future and saying, okay, if I get these exemptions, then surely that makes my sort of journey as a student actuary a lot easier. I'll qualify quicker. And that's true, I guess, on average. But I will say that, one of the grads that I started out with, he did a maths degree, had no exemptions, and he finished all his exams within 2 years. And I work with someone else who's also done the same. So it's, there's averages to these things, but there also are exceptions. So, I wouldn't sort of put my stamp on, yeah, you definitely need to do an actuarial science degree because you'll qualify faster, you'll finish your exams faster. So going back to why I would perhaps do maths if I were to go back to university, it's largely because, if it doesn't matter what degree I take to get a job, then I'd go back to what would I actually enjoy doing in those 3 years at university. A maths degree is a lot more broad, so that's your final chance, I guess, as a student to spend 3 years just devoting yourself to a subject, going into all of its different areas. An actuarial science degree is obviously a bit more devoted towards actuarial science, which again is still interesting, but for me, if we're thinking about destinations, I might have just taken the long way around and just explored a bit more into the field. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I think we also do suggest generally for any sort of career is when picking these options, do have a look at sort of the actual modules that you'll be studying and see what really appeals to you as a person, rather than what you think the automatic next step is. Times do change and things do change. So have a look at those compulsory modules and optional modules, and that will really help your decision. So just keeping with sort of the theme of next steps, and granted, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I think this question is particularly good for us to end on. So we've had a year 11 student who's about to sort of pick their A levels, and they've said a big thank you and they've really enjoyed this and kind of identified some imposter syndrome. So they've said they really enjoy maths and the teachers are suggesting that they pursue further maths. However, will this make their imposter syndrome worse? I think the same will apply for if you're looking at a specific university course or potentially doing your exams for university. Will that next step potentially make imposter syndrome worse? Any opinions on that? Maybe we'll go with Imelda to put you on the spot, if that's all right.
Sure, yeah. I would say don't shy away from doing something. If you're worried it's going to be hard, then it probably will be hard. For further maths A level is quite hard, but if you are looking to sort of start a career in maths, then it's the best way of finding out whether you enjoy it or not. So just be aware of imposter syndrome and keep in good communication with your teachers and your classmates. But I would not let it stop you from taking further maths.
Definitely. Anyone got anything else to add before I end on one final question?
I think, as Imelda said, further maths is intense. It probably is going to make the imposter syndrome worse, but you won't be the only person in that, feeling that everybody's in the same boat. And, if you're the person who's happy to put up your hand at the beginning, you'll probably find that, a lot of other people do as well. So probably just using some of the tools and tips the team have given today. And yeah, as Imelda said, if you're interested, don't let the fact that, it might be hard and it might be getting thrown in the deep end stop you.
Yeah, be scared and do it anyway.
Exactly.
I love that. I think that's going to be my new wallpaper on my phone. But let's finish off on a question sort of about being an actuary, and we touched a little bit on myth busting, but I've had this question 4 times in my inbox throughout this presentation, and that is, what are some projects that you're currently working on as an actuary, if you're allowed to share? I think that's just a nice way to end off on something quite interesting and quite inspiring. Anyone got anything interesting? I know, Imelda, you mentioned something earlier.
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, so one of the things I've been working on at the moment is I work on the internal capital model, and then we have a separate model for war risks. So the company I'm working for at the moment writes a lot of different lines of war insurance, so aviation, marine, war on land, and then like some political risk stuff mixed in. And I essentially revamped the model that models that, and that was really interesting. It was a lot of like looking at real world stuff and how do we turn that into numbers and probability distributions in the internal model. That's something I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, and I think I can add something in this.
Yep.
We've just started with APR, a new project with a client, implementing new pricing systems for them. They're a Lloyd's syndicate. They get involved in some very what probably would seem like weird and wacky insurance to people. So there's going to be a lot of technical side if you're putting in the new system, a lot of coding in Python involved in it. But there's also going to be a lot of talking to the underwriters, going, okay, this particular type of property insurance where it's in the hurricane belt, and that, what sort of things do you take into account when you're pricing how to insure, I don't know, an oil refinery that might get hit by a hurricane, say, and that's going to be quite interesting, because underwriters, are also very technical people, but in a very different way to actuaries, so we're going to be getting exposed to that from it as well.
Really, really interesting. Anyone else got one last little project? Join all yours, nodding away.
Oh yeah, well, if anyone else wants to butt in. But I think I'll go with an interesting account that I priced for an insurance contract. So this was a bank in the US, which recently they saw that some of their customers were falling in terms of new deposits. So they thought, let's do a competition where we'll play the lottery. So anyone who gives us £10 into our bank, saves £10 with us, can choose 6 numbers randomly, 1 to 100. And if we get the same numbers, then we'll give them £50 million. Obviously, if that happens, then it's a really bad day for the bank because nobody's paying money for this lottery. It's just coming out of their own pocket. So they came to our client and said, how much would it cost for you to pay that? In the unlikely scenario that someone does win the lottery, how much would it cost for you to pay that £50 million? And so it fell to me to actually come up with some sort of probability distribution and look at all the different scenarios that we have to try and price what this risk might be. Because 9 times out of 10, well, maybe 99,000 times out of 100,000, nobody's winning this competition. But in the unlikely scenario that they are, then our client would then be on the hook for £50 million. So yeah, I think I liked it because the scenario and the setup was almost exactly like you'd see on A-level maths paper or even a university maths paper, and I had to use some really old school, just traditional maths to work it out. So working with binomial distributions and combinatorials. So it was a good time for me to sort of geek out a bit, which yeah, always happy with a bit of that.
Oh, that's really interesting. I think I'd be more excited for the 1% chance I'd win. But thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who took the time out of your day. I really, really appreciate it, and it was a really, really insightful session. A couple of people have asked about the recording, so just to reiterate, this will be sent directly to your inbox at some point tomorrow, probably around the midday mark. But it will also be shared via our YouTube channel. We've also touched a little bit about the importance of mentoring. And so if you do have any questions, I'm just going to pop this link in the chat, which is a free online mentoring platform where if any questions do pop up after this event, please feel free to head over to that section on our website and you can actually ask some apprentices questions directly and they will reply directly back to you. So if you do have any questions after this, you can head over to our accounting section, our banking and finance section, and there's a couple of other sections as well. We will be matched with an apprentice to help you on your journey and sort of demonstrate to you that you are not alone at all and you will always grow, and there will be times where you're unsure and uncertain, but you'll come out a lot stronger on the other side. A huge good luck if you've got exams coming up as well. But thank you once again. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you to the wonderful team with APR. Thank you.